Welcome back to video 3. This is the continuation for design solutions using virtual machines. And this is the video 3, which we will start with managed disks. So, what are managed disks? Azure Managed disks are, as the name says, a disk that is managed by Azure team in Azure. It simplifies disk management for Azure IaaS VMs, where Azure staff, or Azure people, technicians manage the storage accounts associated with the VM disks. Let's cover some of the benefits for Azure Managed disks. They are simple and scalable. Also, they are used for simple and scalable VM deployments. Managed disks handle storage for you behind the scenes. The only thing you see is the actual disk itself that is attached to the VM. Previously, you had to create a storage account which can hold up to 20 virtual machines and had VHD files for your Azure VM. When you wanted to scale up, you had to create an additional storage account or add additional disk space. Now all of that is done for you. The only thing you have to handle is the managed disk itself, and you do not, or you're not limited to the storage account, how many storage accounts you can have. Currently, you can have up to 10,000 storage disks or VM disks in a subscription, in a single subscription, and you can also have thousands of virtual machines in that subscription because of managed disks and their scalability. The second point is it produces better reliability for availability sets. Managed disks ensures that when a machine is in an availability set, it is isolated from another virtual machine that provides the same or supports the same application, so it avoids single point of failures. When managed disks are created and the virtual machines are in an availability set, Azure automatically places the disk in a different storage unit. We will see that or I will show that in a demo that is coming up. The next point is managed disks are highly durable and available. Azure disks are designed for 5 nines availability. That means 99.999% availability. The next point for managed disks is granular access control. You can use Azure role-based access control to assign specific permissions for managed disks for one or more users at least. And the next point would be for managed disks is that Azure Managed disks have or can be used in Azure backup. You can just back up the Azure disk. You don't even have to back up the Azure VM in this particular sense. And I will cover that a little bit more when I talk about snapshots and images. Also, managed disks support managed disk subscription. managed disk subscription can be or is divided in two types of subscriptions. The first one is storage service subscription, or SSE, where data at rest, or when data or disks are stored in one storage unit, that storage unit encrypts the disks or the data at rest. So that comes as a default in Azure. So SSE is enabled by default. The next encryption, or the second encryption, is the Azure Disk Encryption, or ADE. And Azure Disk Encryption allows you to encrypt the operating system and data disks used by the VM. It means when you basically encrypt the VM or encrypt the data flow or OS on that VM, the disks or the communication to the disks also get encrypted, and that is an industry standard BitLocker encryption technology that is being used for ADE. Managed disks are also used for creation of images and snapshots. And let's quickly cover that topic to see what is the difference between managed disks or images and snapshots. And with managed disks, you can take an image of a generalized VM that has been deallocated. This is an image that will include all of the disks attached to the VM. So if you have 1, 2, 5, or 10 disks attached to this VM, they will be all imaged, and a new VM can be created out of that image. And a snapshot is a copy of a disk, at least one disk of the virtual machine at the point in time that is taken. It only applies, and this is very important, it only applies to one disk. Sometimes snapshots are good, but when a virtual machine has multiple disks, and it's important to have multiple disks, it can be combined with either Azure Backup or image creation. Let's see now the difference. In theory, what is the difference between managed disks versus unmanaged disks? The unmanaged disks are the disks that were in use, or are still in use today, but were in use before managed disks, meaning when you had to create a virtual machine, you had to have a storage account where your VHD files are going to be stored. Those VHD files were so-called unmanaged disks. So the difference is here, as you can see, in unmanaged disks, if you have one storage unit or a storage account, and you create multiple virtual machines and store their drives in that storage unit, it is still a single point of failure. If you were to have an availability set like I covered in video number 2 on the virtual machines, but those virtual machines disks are in one storage unit, when that storage unit goes down, your VMs are still going to go down regardless if they are in availability set or not. With managed disks solution, if you would to have a similar scenario where you have an availability set and you decide to put in that availability set these 3 virtual machines, Azure would put managed disks attached to those virtual machines in separate storage units. So in this case, for example, if the virtual machine that is in the middle here goes down, or a storage unit goes down, that application would be still available on the other two virtual machines because they are not connected in any case. Instead of talking about the theory so much, let's cover a demo, which will make this much easier to understand. That's how it was for me in my case. If you remember, we have created two virtual machines, just simple virtual machines with an availability set and one storage account that has VHD files for those two virtual machines, and I'm just going to briefly show that now. So in this particular case, there are the VHDs for VM2 and VM1. And as you can see, they all belong to one storage account. If that storage account were to go down, these two virtual machines, even though they're in an availability set, they would still go down. They will not be available. So how do we create a managed disk, or how do we create a virtual machine with managed disks? Let's cover that. So let's create another virtual machine. That instead of having a standard storage account for unmanaged disks, has one or two managed disks attached to it. So let's create manage disk VM. Let's put it in the same resource group. I'm going to use the same size of the virtual machine. Let's create an availability set. And for this, so in this case, let's use managed disk. We're going to use the same virtual network. Let's put everything in the same subnet. Public IP address is absolutely not necessary. Same thing with security group. So I'm going to now create a virtual machine with a managed disk, and once I do that, I'm going to stop the video right now. So once I do that, once the virtual machine is created, I'm going to continue recording. Okay, so the creation of the virtual machine with managed disks or manage disk has completed. Let's see now how that looks like. The virtual machine that we have created is called Managed Disk VM1. We have also placed that virtual machine in Managed Disk Availability set. And here is the Managed Disk itself. So, as you can see, this Managed Disk, you can create a snapshot from this particular Managed Disk. It will say that is owner, the VM that it's attached to, is Managed Disk VM1, the operating system of that disk itself, and the source image, which is also very important. So let's see how now the snapshot works. So the couple of ways you can do this. So there's a bit longer way, but it'll give you the list of all the snapshots you have. So if you just go more services and search for snapshots, it will give you the list of all snapshots, or I think you've seen it. If you click on that virtual machine that has managed disks, you can run, you can create a snapshot through that disk. So the easier way for me personally is to go create a snapshot from the disk itself. Let's see, snap. Disk VM1. We're going to put it into the same resource group. Account type is going to be the same, but the nice thing is if you want to change your virtual machine from a standard to a premium, this is also one of the ways you can do it if you have managed disks only. So let's have that snapshot created. While we wait for the snapshot to be created, let me show you the difference. So if we go to the virtual machine that we have created with unmanaged disks, that means it has a disk that is a VHD file that we had to create a storage account for. You cannot, it says here unmanaged, you cannot create a snapshot that easily. That's one of the disadvantages. So I think this operation has completed. So let's see now the list of our snapshots. Here you go. So on our snapshots, that is a current snapshot of the virtual disk. It'll tell you what is the source disk and the time created. This kind of speeds up the whole process of saving the virtual machine or making sure that it doesn't fail. Here's that information. So now we can also export this snapshot by generating the URL and copying it over. And the next step that I'm still missing, I want to create is, or I want to show is also, if you remember, I was talking about the images. I want to show you also how easy it is to image a virtual machine, so to re-image it. And let's see that process. So we're going to pick a virtual machine that has a managed disk. On top of that, we have a capture, so it will create a capture of that virtual machine. Let's call it Let's keep that name. So you can select what to do with that virtual machine once the capture is created. You do not really have any purpose for that virtual machine anymore, because they're just simply not allowed. But if you need to do something, you can create a new virtual machine from that new image that you have created. So I like to personally keep everything clean and create a virtual machine, or delete the virtual machine after the image has been created. So let's have that also completed. So what I'm expecting now to happen is, if we go back to my resource group, is when everything is done, we're going to see our virtual machine managed disks here disappear. Once this process is over, I'm going to start the video. So currently I'm going to stop the video, but I'm going to start the video again once everything's done. So the process has completed. Let me refresh this, and then as you can see now, there was a virtual machine that was called Managed Disk VM virtual machine that is now missing, or better to say, it got imaged, or we created an image out of it, and now it is deleted. So if you look for images, here it is. So that's a new image that we have created. So now, as mentioned or explained in that example, you can, when you have managed disks, you can take an image of a generalized VM, and you can reproduce that VM regardless of how many disks it has attached to it. What we can do is we can create a VM if we want to. We can call it a different way, or we can just keep this image for now if we necessarily need to. So let's move forward. So what happens if you do not want to use managed disks? Well, here are some best practices that I've found throughout the years and have put together on this list to kind of sum up what you can do for these page blobs. So you should keep all the disks or OS and data disks associated with that is associated to one VM in the same storage account. It is easier to manage that VM and makes it function better. Also, let's see if we can review the limits. Here is the link that you can use to see what are the limits of the storage accounts. That you can use, how big the disk can be, how many disks you can have, how many virtual machines can deploy to it. Also, use separate storage accounts for each VM in an availability set. This will keep your application up and running in case the storage account goes down. So if you were to have all the virtual machines you possess in your resource group in one storage account, if that storage account goes down or becomes unavailable, like we had the opportunity to experience that with Microsoft Azure, all your VMs will be unavailable. So what you should do in this situation is one of the best practices as well is to have your web tier VMs and your data tier VMs in a separated availability sets, also in separated Azure storage accounts. I have one treat for you at the end, and it is going to be the largest demo that I have to present. But just to kind of sum up, I have explained managing availability of VMs and the theory of best practices. We have covered also the VM design and design deployments by leveraging availability sets, explaining availability sets. We have also covered now managed disks. Combination of managed disk and availability sets brings us to, or sets our SLA to 99.99% of uptime. What does that mean? Well, 99.9% of uptime is, here it is, still brings it to 52 minutes of downtime a year. That's how we measure it in here. And if you remember, with only using availability sets, you get 95% of uptime, which is 4 hours and 22 minutes of downtime. 99, so combination of availability sets and managed disks brings it up to 99.99% of uptime, and which is then 52 minutes of downtime. And now I'm going to show an example how we can bring it to 5 nines or just 5 minutes of downtime per year for your infrastructure, which I think is very important. The nice thing about it, using availability sets in this scenario, it's absolutely free, and that's part of Azure pricing. So in my next video, I will cover how everything fits together and how we can achieve, more importantly, 5 nines or 99.999% of uptime. Thank you for following, and stick around for the video number 4 of achieving 5 nines. Thank you.